The sound of Philadelphia's 95.7 Philly's new Jam and Go. We're cooking like a pressure cooker inside, going down to 40 degrees sunny.
This week on Life, how globalization is changing the future of work in the world's biggest economy.
Kicking off another music jam.
His father works some days for 14 hours, and you can bet he barely makes a dollar.
Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, where America declared independence. America is booming. Record growth, record job creation.
Living just enough for the city.
But there is another Philadelphia story. The story of what happens to those in the global economy who don't quite make it. Inner city Kensington has seen thousands of jobs go to competitors overseas. Those who've lost out find brotherly love in the offices of the Kensington Welfare Rights Union.
Hi.
Fellow photographer.
Hi, nice to meet you. Yeah. Hey, if everybody wants to come and start getting on the bus.
A busload of activists with a busload of faith.
Well, I went down to the rich man's house and I took back what he stole from me.
They are few today, but even some close to the Clinton White House believe that one day they could be many.
Well, it's under my feet, under my feet.
The people who are most hurt right now by globalization are blue-collar and relatively poor workers who used to have the factory jobs in the developed nations. And unless we come up with a solution for their plight, their insecurities, and sometimes in some nations their lack of jobs, we are going to see a backlash against globalization that will hurt all of us ultimately.
First stop, a lighting company where 2/3 of the jobs have gone to Asian competitors in the last 2 years.
Out at noon? Okay. We just want to welcome the sisters and brothers from the United Electrical Workers and want to thank you for allowing us to visit you today and hear about the struggle that you're dealing with.
I started here 28 years ago with $2.10. 28 years later, I'm only making $11. That's a disgrace.
I'm 57 years old, will soon be 58, and I've spent all my time with Philadelphia Glass. It'd be hard for me to go someplace and try to get another job someplace.
The problem that the workers in this local are running into lately is that more and more production jobs have been lost here at Philadelphia Glass Bending because this company's competitors are bringing in the same products from Korea and Taiwan at a far lower cost. And I'm fighting against this corporate greed-driven race to the bottom on wages, living standards, and environmental issues, where the country that'll sell its labor for the cheapest price will attract all the corporations and their factories and their money. And
only 1 in 4 of those who lose factory jobs will find another that pays as well. America has lost almost 1 million manufacturing jobs in 30 years. This garment factory has lost 95% of its workers in a decade.
We don't mind fair competition. England is fair competition, Germany is fair competition, France, but not Asia, where people work 12 hours, 18 hours a day, get 50 cents an hour, get 20 cents, and some of it is taken away from him, and so on. So how can we compete? There is no justice. We're looking for justice. I don't know how we're going to find it unless globalization, unless the Western countries get together and say enough is enough. We want fair trade, fair competition.
For the people abroad, I don't think it's good news for them because they can't even buy what they make.
But the rate of job loss in American manufacturing is now declining, and bad news in America may be good news elsewhere.
I do not think that it's possible to argue that globalization is anything but a progressive force because essentially it's a very efficient engine for matching capital up to labor, and it employs people where they can be used most productively in the world economy. The problem comes in a particularly developed countries when you get low-skilled workers whose jobs compete directly against workers in poor countries, and every job that's lost in Britain or the United States may result in 3 or 4 jobs being created in Malaysia or Vietnam or some other poor country. That is a net gain, it seems to me, to global welfare.
But a local inequality in one country, you're saying, may be
globally a sacrifice worth paying for
if
jobs and living conditions raised elsewhere.
If you had a fourth international, where the left was truly interested, I think, in the welfare of workers and global inequality, that they would be all in favor of globalization, because in fact it is tending to equalize wages, across, the first and third world divide. It's only within a first world country that it creates a problem.
The problem here is that people have had to take lower wages to try and hang on to their jobs. Real hourly earnings for men in manufacturing have fallen by a quarter in 25 years. And that's had a knock-on effect downtown, with office staff having to work longer hours for the same return.
For the majority of the population in the United States, globalization has meant much higher work hours. So the average family works a couple of months a year more than they did 20 years ago. And that's to maintain stagnating or declining wages. So average wages for non-supervisory workers, wages have not come close to their early 1970s level.
What's that got to do with globalization?
Yeah, it's got a lot to do with it. I mean, it has to do a lot to do with the you can argue about the actual amount of job flow, but one thing is very clear: the threat of job transfer is has a very strong disciplinary effect. So you don't ask for wages if you can be faced with the threat of job transfer.
But your job may be safe if your company does what no one else can, like making the guitar that Elvis Presley played. The Martin Guitar Company has fought off the Asian competition that wrecked the garment industry.
There used to be a significant amount of clothing manufacturing done in Pennsylvania, particularly in eastern Pennsylvania. And most of that was done by women. Well, that work is gone. Clothing manufacturing in Pennsylvania has by and large been decimated. It's gone. It's gone to the Far East. It's gone to Bangladesh. It's gone to Mexico. And we found a tremendous workforce available because these women wanted to work. They knew what it was like to work in a factory, and we brought them in. We taught them how to work with wood. We taught them how to work with wire to make strings. And the thing that's most exciting to me and makes me feel really proud of our culture is that a lot of them will come up to me and they'll say they never knew that a manufacturing environment could also be a pleasant place.
Other companies may subcontract to Asia, rely on robots, or pay ever lower wages. Martin is taking advantage of the global economy, promoting itself as the world's leading brand, and making sure its workers share directly in rising profits and productivity.
We just distributed the profit-sharing checks on Monday. The profit-sharing pool is over $2 million. And you give someone a profit-sharing check that's carved out of a pool that size, they open up the check and they start jumping up and down and screaming because all of a sudden all that work, all the effort, all the agony is worth it. So in our case, wages have not been stagnant, and we have found a way to become more efficient and to share the rewards.
But in Philadelphia, such stories are an exception, and it's not only manual workers who are struggling. You're now almost as likely to lose your job in finance as in a factory. Machines replaced manual jobs, now computers are replacing middle-class ones. Having a porch may no longer mean a safe pension.
When I went into the banking business in the late 80s, most people that worked at the banks planned on working in there for 30 to 40 years, and a lot of people were. But as technology has taken over, and as our entire way of living is sped up, unfortunately, the people that are suffering for it are usually the middle-class people, or the people making that $40,000 to $60,000 a year.
When Terry O'Leary was downsized, he retrained as a music therapist. If you're fired in finance, you have a better than evens chance of finding new work, but only a 1 in 3 chance of a job that pays as well.
Despite the fantastic unemployment numbers we see in the United States, a lot of the new jobs are minimum wage jobs. They're $5 an hour. They're not $20 an hour, which people are used to working for.
Many of Terry's friends and neighbors have been downsized too.
Their options are limited. They can go back for a job at maybe half their salary, or they're forced into working 2 or 3 jobs.
This is what's called the vanishing middle, the squeeze on the middle class.
I believe that's a good term for it. People that you used to socialize with and get together with and work in coordination with, they're just not in the positions they used to be before. You're walking into a convenience store and seeing somebody who used to be a vice president of a bank cutting deli meat at the counter to make ends meet.
The middle class has been somewhat squeezed in industrialized nations by the new global economy. On the one hand, there are great opportunities if you are willing to work very hard and get the right education, make the right connections, sell yourself. But you are also likely to be outsourced or downsized or subcontracted or in other ways working in a more frenzied way for your income and your economic security.
There are new jobs, 28 million in the service sector in the last 30 years. They include jobs that can't be sent abroad or done by computers. But these are often relatively low-wage jobs, and increasing numbers, now 28%, are part-time.
Aren't there plenty of jobs in the inner cities now for people who want them?
Well, I think that may be true, but the issue is no longer something that can be measured by unemployment rates. That these very low unemployment rates that we're seeing, particularly in the U.S., are masking massive transformations in the workforce, trends towards part-time, temp, and so-called MIC work. And this is the type of work we're getting in the new economy. It's very unstable. We hear all this talk of flexibility, but of course the flexibility is for the employers. The employees have very little flexibility, even for these very low-wage jobs.
Not all Philadelphia's new service sector jobs are low-wage. On the city's stock exchange, .com shares have soared. And the new technologies don't just destroy jobs, they also create them. At VerticalNet, the hard hats are a joke. Here they make their money by building business-to-business websites in cyberspace. Multimillionaire founders like Mike McNulty are now planning their own charitable foundations.
We've grown from 1995, 4 people when this company started, and today we are closing in on 900 people in the company. We went public about exactly a year ago, and we were valued at around $200 million a year ago. So really it's just in the last year that we've gone from a $200 million valuation to an $8 billion valuation. I could make a case that $8 billion is undervaluing where we'll be and what will be worth 5 years from now.
Still undervaluing?
Right. Neither my partner or I had any money, really, to start with. We had an idea, and we went out and were able to raise a little bit of capital money and just worked hard and kept refining the idea. And as we say, what a country.
Workers in computer systems make about $1,000 a week, twice the national average wage. And there are almost 3 times as many of them as 10 years ago.
I see the turn of events and the way the economy is going as offering opportunities for every economic class. There's opportunities to go to school, to develop the skills, to move yourself into the next bracket up. And as I say, I think there's never been a better chance at real opportunity here in the States than today.
These are globalization's winners, the so-called digital nomads who can sell their skills across the globe and are paid accordingly, often with handsome stock options. They're leaving the rest behind.
Basically what's happening is the bottom 2/3 of the population, that group that has a high school education or less, has been slowly sinking or stagnant, while the top 1/3 of the population, which is basically that with skills above the high school level, have been doing very well in our economy. And so you see this enormous spreading out of the distribution of income. And the same thing, of course, happens on the distribution of wealth.
We have indeed had a lag between the rise in productivity, which is ongoing, and the rise in incomes of some members of the workforce. And that's now reversing. What's happening now is there's catch-up, and the incomes of workers have started to rise to keep pace with productivity.
So you think as globalization proceeds that there will be, in time, a more equitable distribution of income?
Well, I'm an economist, not a priest, so I don't know as much about equity as perhaps some other people you might talk to, but there will certainly be everybody will be better off.
The fear is the winners may retreat into their own private world, linked up in cyberspace, but cut off from the less well-rewarded majority. Welfare rights activist Cherry Honkala showed us just one of America's 20,000 private communities, where more than 3 million Americans now live behind gates and here even moats.
I'm standing in front of a gated community. This is called Blue Bell. It really is representative of the extreme gap between the rich and the poor here in this country. And only a very small section of the population can afford to live under these conditions. And many of these folks will be employed in high technology jobs and will have life experiences very different and removed from the majority of workers in this country that are working 2 and 3, maybe even 4 jobs just to have a roof over their head.
But it is undoubtedly difficult to elicit from the more fortunate members of society the degree of commitment and resource necessary to widen the circle of prosperity. And I think that only when the well-off understand that a backlash against globalization will hurt them, will undermine their fortunes, will restrict their opportunities, and that they are inviting a backlash by not providing adequate education and training and health care for everyone in society, it's only then that they may relent.
In the city where the Declaration of Independence was signed, giant murals of the classless vision of American democracy. America has also signed the UN Social Summit's commitment to equitable distribution of income and the Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees just and favorable conditions of work and remuneration.
There is a document called the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. I mean, it happens that the West radically opposes it. The leaders of the relativist camp, which reject the Universal Declaration, are the United States, Britain, and others, because they completely reject on principle the socioeconomic components, which include, for example, the right to work. In fact, the United States regards them as preposterous, a letter to Santa Claus. I mean, grotesque. It won't sign conventions supporting them. Britain's not all that different. So if we take our own lofty rhetoric seriously, which we like to use to attack others when it's useful, but if we take it seriously for ourselves, yes, there's people have a right to a decent life.
When people raise the UN Declaration of Human Rights and say, look, it promised the right to work, isn't that just pie in the sky?
Well, I don't think that the right to work is pie in the sky, because there have been history is full of pie in the skies. Slavery would be with us forever. Women would never vote. Trade unions would never exist. Apartheid would never go away. The Berlin Wall would be a permanent fixture. I mean, there are so many things that actually happened that, of course, a right to work, I believe, is something that people have a right to aspire to. The big problem is, is the global economy capable of delivering decent work for all? And if it is not, then we have to see what happens with the rest. The rest cannot be simply treated as poor people, incompetent, incapable, who really didn't know how to gear up to, the high-tech economy that we have today. It's their problem.
Well, I went down to the welfare office and I took back what he stole from me.
For the Kensington Welfare Rights Union, the losers in the global economy are everyone's problem. Today they're protesting against welfare cuts. Globalization's losers, they claim, are being abandoned. They want their message heard beyond the streets of Philadelphia.
It is today that we will make sure that poor people's voices are not unheard and that we are not invisible in Philadelphia or in the country.
I love my country. I love it so much that I think that there is something really wrong with the majority of the people that live in this country that can't have access to the things that they see every day. We see it constantly on the television. We see people living in beautiful homes. We see people driving beautiful cars. We see people with an ability to take their children on vacations. But the majority of the folks that live here, that I see on a day-to-day basis in Philadelphia and across the entire country, most of us are trying to figure out how do we hold on to the very little bit that we got. And a lot of us don't even have that little bit. And something has to be done to show that this situation exists in this country. And this is not the model people want.
Do you believe that the American economy is a model for globalization and the rest of the world?
Yes, if by that you understand that I mean it's not perfect. But certainly as the various models that are on offer, it seems to produce greater wealth for more people than any other model. The Soviet Union has collapsed. Its mini model in Cuba is a shambles. There's double-digit unemployment in socialist France. So that I would say if you're looking for a model, but not a perfect model, America is the place that the world has to look.
A few busloads of activists are unlikely to change America's image as globalization's model economy. But the message that globalization is creating too many losers has been widely echoed, even within the Clinton administration. Philadelphia is the city where the Liberty Bell once rang to declare America an independent democracy. Today, they're chopping up a paper replica.
Because we want to make sure that they understand that we will not disappear. God bless you and thank you for coming.
But there is a wider message from this city, a message you can hear not only from activists like Cherry Honkala. The message that it's not so much poverty that threatens democracy as inequality.
You're playing with fire when you talk about these kind of inequalities. Now, nobody knows how far can it go. We've had 20 years of rising inequality in America with very little kickback. Could we have another 20 years? Maybe. But at some point it gets out of control and is completely inconsistent with democracy in the long run.
The sound of Philadelphia's 95.7 Phillies new Jam and Gold. I'm sending this one out to my crew in North Philadelphia, Broad and Gerard, the crew that used to hang out at the Impulse with Chuck's Bar right down the street.
His mother goes to scrub the floors for Minnie, and you best believe she hardly gets a pity.
In Philadelphia, globalization has meant big rewards, but not yet for the majority. Real hourly wages in the USA are still lower than when Stevie Wonder wrote Living in the City in 1973.
I can't play it right now, and I don't know what time I'm going to get it on, okay? Okay, baby, I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta go. Bye.